Have you ever wondered why we try to be good people even when no one is watching? What if you had the power to do anything you wanted without consequences, without judgment, without anyone ever knowing? Would you still choose to be just? More than 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Plato asked this exact question in one of the most famous philosophical books ever written, The Republic. And surprisingly, the answer he gives is not just about politics or morality, it's about the human soul. In this discussion, I want to walk you through a philosophical idea that changed the way we understand justice, society, and even ourselves. For introduction, The Republic is written as a conversation led by Socrates, who asked a simple and profound question: what is justice? But more importantly, is justice actually good for us? Or do we only pretend to be just because society rewards us for it? Think about that. Do we behave morally because we believe in goodness or because we are afraid of consequences? Right? This question becomes the center of the entire dialogue, and the answers that emerge are still incredibly relevant to the world we live in today. I am going to explain further why and how. At one point in the dialogue, a character named Thrasymachus interrupts the conversation and makes a shocking claim where he says that justice is nothing more than the advantage of the stronger. In other words, laws and moral rules are created by people with power to protect their own interests, which means that justice, according to him, is not just moral truth, it is simply a political strategy. So if you think about modern politics, you might realize this argument still exists today. And many people believe that the system is designed by powerful for the powerful. And that's the case, uh, then being just might actually be a disadvantage, because the people who break the rules sometimes gain more power, more wealth, and more influence. So Thrasymachus challenges Socrates directly. Why should anyone choose justice if injustice is more profitable? Oo nga naman, right? And then we have another character, which is Glaucon. Okay, Glaucon pushes the argument even further, wherein he tells a story that became one of the most famous thought experiments in philosophy. Um, it revolves around the story that is called the Ring of Giges. Imagine a ring that gives you the power to become invisible. Okay, this ring, if no one could see you, if no one could judge you, if there were no consequences, what would you do? Right? Would you still be a good person? Just thinking about that, I think I will be like Juan Tamad. I wouldn't do anything. Just be lazy all day, right? because nothing will happen to me. Or would you do whatever you want? What? Here, Glaucon argues that most people would choose injustice because, according to him, justice is something we practice only because we are forced to. And in this part, I'm just curious if this applies to both men and women because I don't feel mothers would create harm. Anyway, that is not the point of this discussion. To continue this argument, it shows that without consequences, morality might disappear. And this is the moment when Socrates realizes that he must prove something very important. He must prove that justice is good because of rewards, but because of what it does to the human soul. To answer this challenge, Socrates does something very interesting. Okay, so what he did is that instead of analyzing justice inside of a single individual, he decides to examine justice inside a city. Okay, his reasoning is so simple. Justice might be easier to see when it is larger and more visible. Okay, that's why he did it this way. So he begins constructing an imaginary city. Okay, there's one city. At first, the city is very simple. People cooperate because they depend on each other. So we have farmer that grows food, and then there are builders that create houses, and then there are craftsmen who make tools, and each person does the job they are naturally suited for. They just do it. And surprisingly, this simple system, okay, in this simple city, it reveals that there is something about justice, and that justice appears when anyone performs their proper role without interfering with others. Okay, in other words, justice is not just a rule, it is a form of harmony. So when there is a harmony in one city and everyone is performing well, just doing their own part, there is harmony there, and that is just. This is where Plato introduces one of the most powerful ideas in philosophy, where he says that this structure of the city reflects the structure of the human soul. I think I've heard something the same in Japan. According to Plato, the soul has three parts. Okay, first we have reason. This is the part that thinks, analyze, and seeks truth. And then we have the spirit, which is also known as Thomas. And this is the part connected to our courage, pride, and our desire for honor. And then we have the appetite, which is physical. This part represents our physical desires, okay? Things like pleasure, what we want, food, comfort, maybe wealth. Yeah, and wealth. Plato believes that a healthy soul requires balance between these three forces. Okay, for example, reason should guide our decision, and then spirit should support reason with courage and determination, and then appetite should remain disciplined. Okay, when these three parts are in harmony, a person, an individual, becomes just. But when one part dominates the other, this is where disorder begins. So for example, okay, when appetite dominates people, people became slave of their pleasure or material desire. When spirit dominates societies, it can become aggressive and violent. Only when reason leads can harmony exist. That's how these three parts exist in harmony. This leads to Plato's most important conclusion, which is justice is not simply about obeying laws. Justice is about internal order. Okay. A just person is someone whose whole is balanced. A person whose desires, emotions, and intellect are aligned. And this is why Socrates argues that justice makes a person happier, because injustice creates chaos within the soul. Even when someone gains wealth or power through injustice, their inner life becomes fragmented. Don't worry about our politicians. Okay. They're not okay. Their desires fight against their reason. Their ambition consumes their peace. But a just person experiences something different. They experience inner unity. And that unity becomes a deeper form of happiness. All I can think of are my parents. They are so individually just. Also, one of the most controversial ideas in the Republic is something called the noble lie. Socrates suggests that societies sometimes rely on shared myths to maintain unity. Okay, so for example, citizens might believe that they were born from the same land, or that different people possess different natural qualities. Okay, and these myths creates a sense of identity and belonging, but they also raise a difficult question. Mhm. Is it ever acceptable to tell a lie for the sake of social harmony? This is one of the moments where Plato becomes deeply controversial, because it forces us to confront the relationship between truth, power, and political stability. Must be a struggle to him, because that is very controversial. So why does this ancient philosophical conversation still matter today? Because the question Plato asks is still the same question we face today. What kind of society do we want to build? A society driven by endless desire, or a society guided by reason and harmony? Plato believed that political problems begin as a psychological problems. So, which means if individuals cannot govern themselves, societies cannot govern themselves either. In other words, the health of the nation begins with the health of the human soul. And maybe this is the part where philosophy becomes personal, because each of us, okay, carries the same three forces inside. We carry reasoning, we carry into spirit, and desire. Every day we decide which one we lead. Okay, sometimes we follow reason, sometimes we follow emotion, and sometimes we follow desire. But the real question Plato leaves us with is this: what kind of person are you becoming through the choices you make? Because justice is not just a political concept, it is a way of shaping the self. More than 2,000 years ago, Plato wrote the Republic to explain explore the meaning of justice, but what we discovered was something deeper. Justice is not simply a law. Justice is a harmony of the soul. And when that harmony exists within individuals, it can also exist within society. Maybe that's why philosophy still matters, because it reminds us that the most important battles are not always political. Sometimes they are internal. This is why I can say that philosophy is not dead. When there is mind, there is philosophy. And the question we must always ask ourselves is simple. Are we living in harmony with our own soul? That's the end of the discussion for today, and thank you for listening.